Okay. So once again, on behalf of your hosts, Green Venture and Environment Hamilton, thank you for joining us this evening. My name is Helena, and I work on Green Venture's green infrastructure programs like Naturehoods and Deep Pave Paradise. And if you're unfamiliar with Green Venture, we're a nonprofit environmental education organization here in Hamilton, and we've been leading local green infrastructure or natural stormwater management projects in Hamilton alongside Green Communities Canada for well over a decade now. And we're very excited to be part of their new Living Cities program in partnership with Environment Hamilton. So our hope is that tonight's webinar will create a bit more of a cohesive idea of how different organizations, programs, and policies can complement each other in the effort to lessen the impacts of hard infrastructure and the various activities occurring throughout our watersheds. So joining us this evening is Emily Amon from Green Communities Canada to tell us about the Living Cities program, followed by Carrie Vanderperk from the City of Hamilton, who's going to talk a bit about Hamilton's first watershed action plan. And finally, Patrick Gilbride from Reap Green Solutions, who's going to share some examples of how other nearby municipalities have implemented and utilized stormwater fee structures. So I'm now going to hand it off to Ian Borsuk of Environment Hamilton, our local partner in the Living Cities project, to just talk a little bit about stormwater rates in Hamilton and Environment Hamilton's activism in that regard over the past few years, or several years actually. So off to you, Ian.
Yeah, thank you. Environment Hamilton has been very active on advocating for adaptation and mitigation measures when it comes to climate change, and addressing extreme weather events was seen as one of those key priorities that we wanted to push along. And interestingly, in the city of Hamilton, we have a unique relationship to stormwater and our stormwater system, in that our various different city councils over the years have discussed a stormwater fee, which Patrick will be discussing in more detail, numerous times. It's been called a rain tax. It's been called numerous other names in a derogatory term. However, after many years and about several hundred petitions signatures that we've gathered over the years as well over the course of the last 3 terms of council, the city of Hamilton is moving forward with a stormwater fee. So if you like what Patrick has to say, if you're interested in more, Hamilton is going to be pursuing one. Our city council approved a list of guiding principles that will be guiding that effort. But we're still very much in the early stages, and there's a lot to learn from other communities elsewhere in Ontario. And on that note as well, there'll be a lot of information coming out about those principles and what things we'll be looking forward to across the city of Hamilton. And including, we're going to be hosting a lunchtime webinar session on May 10th with some city staff to kind of go over some additional details. So if you like what Patrick has to say and you're interested in more, definitely stay tuned to that. And I'll hand it back to you.
Thanks, Ian. So I'm just going to call up Emily, our first presenter, to bring up any slides that you may have prepared. And I'll just give you a quick introduction. So Emily Amon is the manager of green infrastructure at Green Communities Canada. She has a Master of Arts in Sustainability Studies and an honors bachelor degree in Environmental Sciences and Studies. And when she's not helping communities rip up asphalt, Hamilton included, or planting new green spaces, she's actively starting up her own homestead on Vancouver Island with ducks, rabbits, goats, and gardens. Thanks, Emily.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much for that introduction. I just wanted to start by acknowledging that I'm currently on the unceded territory of Cowichan tribes here in Duncan, BC. I hope to one day have you over to my little homestead here where there are ducklings, like 1 week old right now, which is very exciting. I'm happy to share a little bit more today with the folks on the call about our newly released Living Cities framework, and I hope that you might be inspired to use it to ramp up green infrastructure in your community. So for some folks on the call, this might be the first time you're hearing about Green Communities Canada, so I just wanted to give a quick introduction. We're a pan-Canadian nonprofit organization that connects local climate and environmental groups to resources, shared programming, and funding so that they can roll out climate action on the ground and in their communities. GCC has been around since 1996, and currently we have 22 member organizations across Canada. We also work with a number of partner organizations to help develop and deliver our programming. Our 3 core programs are residential energy retrofits, active transportation, and green infrastructure. So some folks may on the call probably have a pretty good understanding of what I mean when I use the term green infrastructure, but others may like to see a little bit of an introduction. Not everybody uses the terms green infrastructure to mean the same thing, and there's a lot of different terms that are used that sometimes mean what we're talking about. So for example, nature-based solutions, you can see in this graphic, may include what some people call natural infrastructure, or some people call low impact development. When we're talking about green infrastructure, we're talking about the whole gamut. So that includes the existing natural assets. So that might be existing forests and parklands, meadows, lawns, soil, and wetlands, as well as enhanced assets. So that's human created features on the landscape, so such as rain gardens, green roofs and walls, bioswales, urban trees, naturalized stormwater ponds, and also engineered assets. So permeable pavements, rain barrels, cisterns, perforated pipes, infiltration trenches, etc. All of these together kind of combine to create what we're calling green infrastructure, and they're essentially systems that work with or use natural processes that offer a range of environmental and social benefits to society. It does not necessarily include renewable energy technology or other kinds of infrastructure that further sustainability goals. Some of the benefits of green infrastructure include mental health, groundwater recharge, water quality, urban cooling, stormwater management, air quality. Essentially, all of these features of nature and natural processes are incredible in and of themselves, but green infrastructure helps to build climate resilience in so many different ways. It can reduce flooding, it can help to infiltrate water and cool cities, and on top of that, there are beyond the environmental benefits, there are a number of different social benefits. It can be a much more cost-effective option for municipalities to deliver stormwater services. And there are tangible physical and mental health benefits for local residents, the more GI there is in their neighborhoods. It can support biodiversity. And so it's essentially just a win-win-win. People are happier, the environment is cleaner, and it's better for all kinds of species and all of us as well. Despite this, the uptake has been pretty slow and low in municipalities across the country. And so that's kind of what influenced our Living Cities project. For a number of years, we were doing demonstration projects, and we're still doing those demonstration projects like Deep Haven Paradise. But we saw the need to take it a little bit more of a policy approach to try to kind of get it from both ends, address issues from the top down, and also address issues using demonstration projects from the bottom up. So our Living Cities program was developed to help address some of these challenges. So we have 3 mandates within our Living Cities project. We want to see green infrastructure that is equitable, so prioritized in areas of greatest social and environmental need and in underserved communities. We want to see green infrastructure that's abundant, so implemented widely throughout the landscape, and green infrastructure that is thriving, so it's well functioning over the long term and maintained properly throughout its life, so we can all experience the full range of benefits. So the Pathways to Living Cities framework is a resource that we developed alongside a research team at University of Toronto. It provides a strong evidence base for how municipalities can work to integrate GI into city building. It was initially envisioned as a concise, high-level document to support municipal practitioners to advance equitable, abundant, and thriving GI. But as the project evolved, the team conducted more research and received input from lots of different knowledge holders. And we realized there was a need for a more comprehensive resource to help point GI practitioners to strategies, tools, and real-world examples of success. So this framework is a little bit longer than we originally envisioned it, but it helps to provide lots of different policy and technical knowledge, as well as 17 evidence-based strategies to advance equitable, abundant, and thriving green infrastructure, with over 250 case studies, examples, and resources of cities advancing GI across North America and Europe. So, our one thing that we wanted to be explicit about was the most effective GI strategy is to preserve and protect what is already there. Constructed green infrastructure is great and can serve many great purposes in cities, but ultimately the existing natural ecosystems are a lot more effective at delivering a lot of environmental services like flood mitigation, water filtration, carbon sequestration, heat reduction, etc. It's also much more cost effective to preserve existing ecosystems and green spaces than to alter, destroy, and then renaturalize them. So number one on our list is preserving existing GI. Number two is maintaining and restoring degraded green infrastructure. And then finally, creating or new GI in urbanized areas. So this is really important because as municipalities grow and expand, it's very common practice to completely clear the land of any and all natural features. For example, this development you can see in the photo here. And then they'll put in a couple new trees after they've put the field in place. And you can see this young person standing underneath probably a 7-year-old tree, and it's not really providing very much shade at all. This type of destroy and replace kind of cycle is really detrimental and sort of pushes us back in our goal of making our cities more green and more livable. So again, you can see the forest was cleared to make the field. Obviously, you can't play soccer in a forest. But all of the families are gathering underneath the tiny shade trees of these new seedlings. The idea is to really encourage municipalities and the developers they work with to preserve as much already existing green infrastructure instead of destroying it and then adding new GI. So there's a number of key strategies to create the 3 pillars, so equitable, abundant, and thriving. So in terms of equity, the purpose is to prioritize GI for environmental equity by identifying under-natured areas, understanding the distribution of the challenges, engaging people in GI planning and decision-making, employing policy tools to enhance accessibility, using GI to advance reconciliation to support Indigenous-led green infrastructure projects, and building municipal Indigenous partnerships. In terms of abundance, we are looking at setting requirements and standards for GI, so providing a public mandate and aligning with other strategic priorities. Because GI can be used for so many different issues, for example, public health and climate change, it can be leveraged and sort of framed in different ways in order to make it work within different types of planning and different types of development. Next, we also want to lay the groundwork for systemic integration of GI. So that involves building knowledge and technical capacity, using valuation approaches and asset management to better integrate GI into citywide decision-making, introducing and expanding funding mechanisms, and improving data and monitoring. And finally, growing support for GI. So seeking support from higher levels of government and facilitating community-based action to address the issue from both ends. And then finally, we want these systems to be healthy, and we want them to work the way that they're meant to. So our recommendations for that are to build partnerships and find champions to ensure that multiple stakeholders are in alignment and in support of GI implementation, to pick indicators and monitor over time, and to support GI operations and maintenance by ensuring adequate resourcing, technical expertise, and clear responsibilities. So our framework was used to develop local action plans for our pilot round of the Living Cities policy program. And so last year, or kind of at the beginning of this year, we finished up that project. And Hamilton was one of the pilot partners in the development of these pathways. So these community-specific policy pathways help to identify the specific recommendations that are connected to the Living Cities policy framework, and the specific actions that can be taken, and the specific programs and policies that already are in place that help to situate Hamilton's action in the broader context around Canada, and also help to lead the path forward for advancing this work. So our next steps for the Living Cities project is to resource pilot communities to build support for implementing those pathways. So taking those next steps after receiving those pathways to sort of bringing those recommendations into light, bringing in more communities to develop more policy pathways, and supporting direct action and equity-focused community-led GI implementation across Canada. So thank you all for taking the time and giving me the opportunity to share a little bit more about our projects. You can see my email on the screen, and I'm happy to field any questions at the end.
Thank you, Emily. If you do have any questions about the Living Cities program, you're welcome to put them in the chat now, and we'll read them out loud during the Q&A. But for now, I'm just going to invite our next speaker, Carrie, to please share your presentation if you have one. So Carrie Vanderperk is the Director of Watershed Management for the City of Hamilton, where her work includes leading the remediation of Shadote Creek and Coots Paradise, the development of Hamilton's first watershed action plan, and leading Hamilton's source water protection team. Her career in Hamilton Water spans over 20 years, where she has held various leadership roles in environmental enforcement and drinking water quality and compliance. Carrie's a certified environmental practitioner specializing in environmental protection and water quality, and a graduate from the Mohawk College Environmental Science Program. Carrie's a Hamilton girl, born and raised, a dedicated public servant, a mediocre golfer, and most importantly, a mom of 2 amazing teenagers. Go ahead, Carrie.
All right, thank you for that. Can you hear me okay? And can you see my screen? Are the 2 important questions right now?
Yes to both.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Okay, good evening, everyone. First, I want to thank the awesome folks at Green Venture and Environment Hamilton for asking me to present to you tonight. I appreciate the opportunity to share the work that the city is undertaking to improve the quality of our watersheds and ultimately reduce the impact to Hamilton Harbor, and of course, help to do our part to fulfill the goal of delisting Hamilton Harbor as an area of concern. So my background a little bit, I've been at the city for 23 years. It's hard to say that out loud. Feels like it was just yesterday that I started as an environmental enforcement officer with the city's sewer use bylaw team. I went on to lead that team for about 16 years, working with a really great team to bring some of Hamilton's worst industrial polluters into compliance with regards to their discharges to the city's sewer infrastructure. I then moved on to a manager role where I led that same enforcement team, but I also learned a lot when I took on leading the city's environmental lab, which I'm proud to say is one of the best environmental laboratories in the province. So if you have an opportunity to go down and tour the facility, please do. It's really cool, and they do some amazing work down there. And I also was responsible for the compliance support group, which is a very small but mighty team that manages the drinking water and wastewater quality management systems, and essentially ensure that the city is in compliance with the numerous legislative requirements that come with operating a very large water and wastewater utility. And in 2021, I was asked to take on this new and very exciting challenge, leading the city's very first watershed management office. This office includes our very talented source water protection team, who is very established and has been in operation for many years. But they look after our municipal well system and also the data associated with that, as well as another very small but mighty team of one, which is Tim Crowley, whom some of you may know, is the project manager who is leading the remediation of Chinook Creek, as well as this program, the Watershed Action Plan, which is what I will speak to you tonight. So our objective, reducing point source contamination into Hamilton Harbor, has been a major investment for the city, and a major investment focus for the city over the past few decades. And by the end of this year, the majority of this work will be implemented. The big one for the city is the completion of the Woodward Avenue wastewater treatment plant upgrades and the addition of tertiary treatment to that facility. A long time coming. But really the non-point watershed sources, such as urban runoff that carries contaminants into our natural water bodies, are still an issue. And in fact, really at this point are the leading issue. In order to continue progressing towards those improved harbor conditions that we're all hoping for, a collaborative effort is required in order to plan, develop, and execute actions that are within the care and control of the city. There have been numerous studies and reports over the years from various entities and agencies, lots of scientific data that's been gathered around the quality of the harbor. And this program, the Watershed Action Plan, really started by sifting through all of that intel to determine what further actions the city needs to take and by when. And then by bringing together a consortium of experts from all of our partner agencies, as well as representatives from departments across the city, to ultimately prioritize actions and projects that will provide the best bang for our buck and support the delisting efforts for the HHRAP community and the city. So really essentially this program will work to ensure that in time, city infrastructure and day-to-day operations of the city have minimal impact on our receiving waters. And when I say city infrastructure, I'm talking about combined sewer overflows, stormwater outlets, landfills that discharge into receiving waters, city facilities all across the city, you name it. And then when I say day-to-day operations, I'm talking about things like road salt application during our winter operations, how we remove snow and where we store it, catch basin cleaning and maintenance, golf course operations at our two very wonderful and beautiful municipal courses, which you should check out if you've not had the opportunity and if you're a golfer. So why are we doing this and why now? Really because it's the right thing to do. And we've certainly seen a new political will for change and how we manage the city's impact on the environment. The Chinook Creek spill, it taught us a lot. And in Hamilton Water, it taught us a lot about accountability. It taught us a lot about communication. It certainly taught us a lot about humility. But basic things like how we ask our council for resources, how we hire those resources, and ensuring that the folks that we hire to operate our systems are coming to us with those basic core environmental values and are working for Hamilton for a greater purpose than just a paycheck. Now, if someone comes into a workplace like Hamilton Water and they don't have a passion for protecting the environment and serving the community, then we've hired the wrong person. So our hiring practices have improved to reflect that. There were several drivers that were behind developing the Watershed Action Plan. 3 of them, the key drivers, are on the screen. But essentially over several years, there was lots of ideas and concepts of watershed improvement actions that could be taken by various departments across the city. But all were sort of in isolation. And what was missing was a vehicle to take all of those ideas and concepts, run them through an expertise-based evaluation process, apply the various lenses such as impacts from climate change, social economic perspectives, and prioritize them, and then apply the costs that are associated to them. And then present them to council for consideration, and ultimately turn the top contending actions into a reality. Just a little bit of a history before I move on from the slide is that the city has been an active participant in the HHRAP process since its inception in the mid-80s. However, there was never an appointed city representative that could sort of act as a one window for the HHRAP community in order for them to access the city's various departments, and also to act as a conduit to our senior leadership team and to City Council. So my team in watershed management was formed for all the reasons that I mentioned earlier, but also to meet that one window need. So that the communication channels and lines could be open and could be improved. So we set out with our marching orders to implement a watershed action plan. And to be honest, at the time when we started down this path, it was very overwhelming, and one of those situations where it was we weren't really sure what the heck we were going to do. But we wanted a plan that serves and complements the work of our local HHRAP office and all of our partners, including the conservation authorities and other municipalities that are involved in the HHRAP process and working to delist the harbor. So the SLC provides we created an SLC, I guess I should say that first, a stakeholder liaison committee, and that SLC provides a forum for collaboration between the city and several stakeholders that have expertise and knowledge or interest and can help us provide strategic direction and consultation in the development of this watershed action plan. So the SLC meets regularly. We're currently in the process of expanding that consultation to speak with our Indigenous communities, our academic partners, and also the non-government organizations out there in order to understand what their needs and wants are for the Watershed Action Plan. This graphic is it's a little busy, but it's really representing the reporting structure and how the Watershed Action Plan and the SLC fit into the greater HHRAP Secretariat. As you can see, the HHRAP is, it's structured with multiple technical working groups that are already well established, and we really didn't want to create another group or another technical committee. So we utilized the already established HHRAP Watershed Advisory Group. And this Watershed Advisory Group is chaired by Chris McLaughlin from the Bay Area Restoration Council. And really what it does is that's sort of our what we consider to be our sort of reporting body. So we would take the Watershed Action Plan and the work that the SLC is doing, and before we take it to council for that ultimate approval, we would run it through the Watershed Action Plan to ensure that we have buy-in from all of our partners. And in fact, speaking of council, we will be going to our General Issues Committee in June of this year to provide our new council with an update on the progress of this Watershed Action Plan. So this is just a little bit of a representation of where the Watershed Action Plan fits within the city. And you may recall that Hamilton Water established what we call the Clean Harbor Program a number of years ago. And really that lays out all of the details for all of the capital works that have been done or are being worked on in order to improve our harbor water quality conditions. So the Watershed Action Plan really fit perfectly under that umbrella of the Clean Harbor Program. And if you go to the city's website and you search for Clean Harbor Program, there's a pretty good description of the program and each one of these blue boxes that you see on the left-hand side of the screen. But on the left-hand side is really a collection of projects and programs that represent approximately $550 million that's been invested by the city since really the late 80s to improve the water quality of the harbor. And this includes capital investments such as the ongoing upgrades to the Woodward wastewater treatment plant, which is coming to a close very, very shortly. And then the city's financial contribution to the Randall Reef project was a big one. But it also includes things that are not shown here, like academic research partnerships and ongoing contributions to our partnering agencies that conduct services for us, like sampling and monitoring of water quality. So these are what we consider to be sort of point source related works. Those capital improvement projects that we see a need, we go in and we build something to fix a problem. On the right-hand side of the slide represents the shift to in focus to sort of that non-point source related works. And that's really what the Watershed Action Plan will ultimately identify. Not to say that if we come up with other capital programs that will help to improve water quality, that we wouldn't do them or that we wouldn't contemplate them. But really the focus of this program is on sort of those non-point source issues. This slide here also very busy. I apologize for that, but it does represent the process that we're taking in collecting all of that intel that's been gathered over the years by the members of the HHRAP community, running it through an evaluation process and identifying improvement deliverables that can be actioned. So the orange bubbles that you see represent some of the examples of that intel that we've gathered and that we're evaluating. And then the pink and blue and green bubbles on the right, they represent sort of examples of actions that could be proposed in the Watershed Action Plan. So that might include capital projects, but it's likely to include things like policy changes and operation and maintenance task changes to ensure that we're doing everything possible across our organization and within our operations to protect our receiving waters. And you might be wondering, what are these actions? Tell us what the goods are, but we just don't know yet. We're still developing them with our partners. And right now we're in the process of building that evaluation tool that will be used to evaluate and prioritize all of the actions. Just keeping in mind that this program is really in its infancy. Our inaugural SLC meeting took place in just over a year ago in February of 2022. And we were meeting throughout 2022 and also throughout 2023. We have a target of completing that evaluation process by the end of this year. This is just a list of the membership of our stakeholder liaison committee. Again, it's structured to provide a balance of perspectives, skills, knowledge, expertise, and it includes representatives from departments all across the city, as well as our friends from the RBG and the various conservation authorities. And Conservation Halton actually wanted to be involved as well, even though this is a city, these are city-led initiatives. They are part of our HHRAP process and felt that they could also take a lot of this back to their own municipality. All these findings that we have will be, the plan that we put together will be essentially, like I mentioned earlier, taken up through the Watershed Advisory Group members for, which is listed on the right-hand side of the screen here, for their sort of verification and acceptance before taking them to council for final approval. Consultation. So our consultation does expand further than just the HHRAP community. We've begun to consult with our academic community, other non-government organizations, our Indigenous nations, and just other government agencies. This list is it's not exhaustive. As we've been starting these conversations, we're adding to this list because people say, well, what about these people? And then they might be interested in helping out with this or that. So things are just sort of expanding as we're going through this process and having these really amazing conversations with our partners. We're also working through details of community engagement. So we will be utilizing our Engage Hamilton platform, and we're planning to launch that this coming September in order to get the public involved in this conversation as well. So this is just last couple of slides here to lay out our next steps. As you can see, this process and the Watershed Action Plan will be an ongoing and sort of cyclical process, as most sort of continual improvement type projects are, wanting to make sure that after the Watershed Action Plan is set in place, we're going back and we're looking at the plan and we're making sure that it still makes sense, and evaluating it on a regular basis and reprioritizing as we need to. So we are here currently between steps 2 and steps 3 in the process. And my last slide, just outlining sort of the next steps in a little bit more detail. So the work that we've completed to date, really since February of 2022, is that draft inventory from all of the intel that we've gathered, finalizing the scoring matrix that we will use to score the inventory. We've had various workshops and meetings with both internal and external stakeholders, launching of the City of Hamilton Watershed Action Plan website, which I thought I had a link here, but I don't see it now, so somehow it disappeared. But I can maybe send that off to the folks at Green Venture to distribute. But it's a great website, and it's really a good tool to get any information that you might be looking for. We're also looking at a GIS story map, which is a very interactive tool. It's pretty cool. I've seen the sort of the demo. It's pretty close to being launched. I would say in the next couple of weeks it should go live. And I want to thank our partners at all of the conservation authorities for helping us to develop the mapping system that you'll see that's in this story map. It's pretty cool. So I encourage you to take a look at it when that comes out. And then the next steps, what we're working on over the next, I would say, year or so is investigating a consultant assignment. So we're thinking that perhaps once we have a plan finalized before it goes to the Watershed Advisory Group, just to have another set of eyes on it and to provide that sort of engineering perspective. So that's something that we're looking into. Tim is, he's very good. He's our project manager extraordinaire, but he is only one person. And he has his hands full. So we're hoping to perhaps get some resources to help with this process as we kind of get through it. And then public engagement, as I mentioned, launching in September. And really our ultimate goal is to have a Watershed Action Plan, including the financial plan associated with that, in front of our General Issues Committee for the 2025 budget cycle, which really means we'll be presenting it sometime in the fall of 2024 for approval. So very exciting times. And that is my last slide. So I'm happy to take any questions that you might have. And I'm also very happy to share my contact information should anyone have anything that pops up into their brains after the fact and wants to ask some questions.
Thank you so much, Carrie. We are just a little bit behind schedule. So just once again, if you have any questions, they can go into the chat box and we can answer them throughout, or just read them aloud at the end. And for now, I'm just going to ask Patrick, our last final guest, to please bring up your slides. Thank you. So Patrick Gilbride is the manager of green infrastructure programs at REAP Green Solutions, an environmental charity that provides people with the practical tools, knowledge, and capacity for action to make sustainable living the norm. He's passionate about working with homeowners, businesses, and institutions to implement nature-based solutions that provide benefits to them and to the wider community. Go ahead, Patrick.
Hi, thanks so much, Helena, and thanks to Green Venture as well as Environment Hamilton for hosting this today. It's a real pleasure to join our friends in Hamilton. I'm in Kitchener-Waterloo on the traditional territory of the Haudenosaunee, Anishinaabe, and Neutral peoples, but I was actually met my wife when she was a student at McMaster, so I have a lot of fondness for Hamilton's people, places, and parks, and I always like to go and visit whenever I can. So this is a treat for me. So REAP Green Solutions, we are an environmental charity that help people live sustainably. We really strive as part of our mission to give people the practical tools in order to make sustainable living the norm, and specifically with a climate change lens. And what I'll talk about today and what I work on day to day is really the climate adaptation side of things, is adapting to our changing climate that's happening. And stormwater is a perfect sort of topic to fit into that. So, yeah. This is kind of at a high level what I'll talk about today. But yeah, in the interest of time, I'll just dive right in. So Emily did a really good job of sort of articulating the environmental benefits, as well as Carrie. I know, speaking from our experience, a huge driver from the municipalities that we work within, the Grand River Watershed, and specifically the ones that have brought in a stormwater utility, are City of Kitchener, City of Waterloo, and City of Guelph a little more recently. And you know, these are conditions that are, you know, true across Canada. There's a huge infrastructure deficit, and that's just maintaining the existing gray infrastructure. And that was estimated at 6.8 billion. I don't have a current figure. I know it's still a big minus sign. And stormwater utility fees are really sort of one way to try and address that deficit. The other sort of big driver, from speaking from you know, our municipal partners' perspective, is, you know, funding stormwater infrastructure through basically a property tax was not exactly a fair exercise. You know, large, big properties with hard surfaces, impermeable parking lots, and similar type surfaces were paying similar rates to, you know, residential homes. So it really made sense to move to a stormwater utility and try and match the fees that people are using for their stormwater runoff for that infrastructure, you know, by having these hard surfaces, by having the runoff that goes into the storm sewers and downstream, is really sort of gives the municipality the ability to sort of make it a little more fair and you know, have those larger properties carry more weight. And obviously, as it's been touched on already, another big driver, and this is another sort of economic driver as part of it as well. You know, once that infrastructure deficit is addressed, there's still, we know that because of climate change, we're already experiencing much bigger storms. And because of that, you know, damage caused by flooding, it's over $1 billion a year the insurance industry is across Canada, and flooding is a big part of that. And it's only going to go up. So so that's a major sort of piece of this. So Kitchener and Waterloo were one of the first to bring in stormwater fees. They did that a little over 10 years ago. And pretty soon after they did get some pushback from the community, specifically, again, as Ian mentioned, calling it a tax, even though it was designed to be revenue neutral. And then there's also a lot of people who said, why should I have to pay this fee on my water bill? Because I'm doing things that will reduce the amount of runoff that comes from my property. So again, in the interest of fairness, Kitchener and Waterloo implemented a stormwater credit program, something that they're able to do because of the utility fee. And really sort of, as you can see, you know, they would give a percentage of that credit back based on different things that people did. And they'd have an estimate, you know, if you fill out an application, if you have a rain barrel or a couple rain barrels, you might get between 9 to 20% back. If you do another sort of level up, you know, put in an infiltration gallery or a larger cistern, then you might get a larger credit. And then, you know, the higher ones are for sort of landscaped features. That's the biggest sort of way to capture and reduce the runoff from your property. So those are incentivized the greatest, so they have a formula for calculating how much runoff is sort of captured by these different features. To be fair, though, there was a lot of interest in the credit program when it first came out in 2012, but it kind of plateaued. And to be perfectly frank, a good proportion of the people who participated were people who already had rain barrels or infrastructure installed. So there's still value in that because the city had a better understanding of, okay, how many rain barrels are out there, how much are they contributing? But it wasn't necessarily motivating new behavior change or new people putting in rain gardens. Because to give you a sense of that 45% credit, a typical residential homes may be paying about $20 per bill on their utility fee. So 45% of that's, maybe $8 or $9. So not a huge financial motivation to take that action. So we have seen some of these programs sort of evolve over the years. City, so yeah, just quickly, I mentioned a lot of these: rain barrels, rain gardens, infiltration galleries. And there is some nuance between these different programs. City of Waterloo also provides credits for trees of a certain size for their ability to capture stormwater and reduce runoff, as well as green roofs. And I won't go into it. I'm talking strictly around the residential side of things for the most part here. There's also sort of a more complicated sort of program for some of those properties, like the one I showed you earlier for the non-residential, sort of the malls, the industrial, the institutional sort of properties, where it's a little more complicated and gets into water quality, not just sort of how much water you capture. So City of Guelph, I think they implemented their stormwater utility fee after Kitchener-Waterloo. From what I've understood, their public engagement process was very positive. Maybe that's why they didn't actually implement a stormwater credit program and decided instead to use some of that, the funding that they've gathered from that stormwater utility fee to do some other types of incentives. So the rain garden rebate program is something that we've partnered with City of Guelph on. And the whole idea is to get beyond rain barrels again. So we have a sort of custom experience where somebody will come on site. We call them the rain garden coach, and allow people to calculate the appropriate size for their rain garden, provide them aesthetic guidance, which is a huge barrier for a lot of people, as well as provide hand-holding through the process while they actually build out their rain garden. Another program we run with City of Guelph, funded through the stormwater utility fee, is the backyard tree planting program. And again, a really sort of custom service where we plant the right tree for the right place and get, a arborist out on site who is able to actually recommend a tree that will sort of meet sort of not only the ecological sort of requirements, but also sort of the aesthetic goals of the homeowner. So, the tree that's going to be looked after and have a chance to actually grow to maturity and provide those benefits is one that the homeowner wants and wants to look after. A couple other programs Guelph runs around rainwater harvesting. And again, I mentioned a really key piece of this, which I won't go into, is the ICI, that stands for Industrial, Commercial, and Institutional Credit Program. And again, that's really critical because we know that a lot of that, from a pollution perspective, that's where a lot of the pollution is coming from that runoff. So, and again, I think one of the key things in terms of that infrastructure deficit piece, as I said, Kitchener and Waterloo have been collecting these stormwater fees for over 10 years now, and it's allowed them to embark on some really ambitious projects. This was sort of a pilot project. You can see in the inset in the upper right how, back in the 70s and 80s, a lot of the streams and creeks in Kitchener-Waterloo were basically channeled into concrete streams, which, created, it got the wet water away fast, but it also created a lot of problems downstream in terms of erosion, pollution, which we talked about. And not to mention just not allowing that water to infiltrate and recharge the groundwater system. So having that funding has allowed Kitchener to embark on some more ambitious projects to naturalize some of the waterways within the city. And you can see sort of the artist rendering of this is Phil Singer Natural Area. I think it's really smart that what Carrie laid out. So a real key piece of this, and where we think it's really important is educating the people around these projects to understand why it's happening. Because some people have fear that by doing this naturalization, it'll actually increase the flood risk instead of reduce it. There isn't a great understanding of that. So getting people on board with these projects is really crucial. And that's one of our sort of roles in these types of projects, is the community engagement piece, as well as sort of educating people on what they can do on their home, on their own properties, because these projects on these parks and natural areas only make up a small proportion of the land in the city. And without private landowners making a contribution, we know that that these projects will not sort of withstand some of the big storms that we talked about when it comes to climate change. It really takes a belts and suspenders approach, and private property owners are a real sort of critical piece of that. So I'm probably over time, but just wanted to leave you because I think this one's really inspirational. The other sort of thing that we do in partnership with our municipalities is work with churches and schools. This was one at St. Francis of Assisi in Kitchener. And we really hope that it has a springboard effect. So everybody who's sort of part of this church congregation and help to design and plant and look after this rain garden is really taking these lessons, and will hopefully apply them on their own properties and throughout the city. So I just think this is such a cool sort of picture. So I just wanted to end on that one. So I'll pass it back to you, Helena, for managing our Q&A.
Thanks, Patrick. And thanks again to all of our speakers for some really great presentations tonight. It is 8 p.m., but we did get started a little bit late. And if there are any questions, I am sure that we have a few minutes to stay on and answer those. So feel free, if you do have a question, to come off mute or raise your hand. Or if you want to write it in the chat box, I can definitely read it aloud. So any of our participants, but also if any of our presenters want to ask each other any questions, that is more than welcome as well. Yeah, so there's nothing, oh, just a thank you in the chat.
Hey everyone, I'll ask a question.
Yeah, go for it, Michael.
Yeah.
I didn't know if you were waiting for my okay.
Yeah, thanks to the presenters. That was all great information. I appreciate you guys taking the time to share that with us. I'm not sure who this question is for, but I'm just wondering if the city is looking to do any sort of rebate type program on private property once the actual fee structure is changed.
I can answer that question. So it's certainly something that we are looking at. And if we go to council. We are going to General Issues Committee on June 28th. And that is really to provide them with some options for what the program could look like. So yes, definitely there are rebate programs built into that as one of the options, and there's several options within that option of what the rebate programs could look like. So we're working with our consultant is ACOM, and they've actually done quite a few of the municipal stormwater rate programs throughout a number of municipalities across the province and really across Canada. So we're in good hands, but that's something that they're certainly continuing to structure right now with the intent to go in front of council with the options at the end of June.
Cool, thank you. I guess just a follow up, since I have you here and I'm genuinely curious about this. When was the decision made to implement a stormwater fee in the city, and was there anything in particular that like the straw that broke the camel's back, so to speak? Because I know this is something that's kind of been at council for a few years now.
So they did approve the guiding principles back at towards the end of last year. The formal approval for so keep in mind that it could still get quashed. We're not there yet. We haven't quite got it over the finish line, so to speak. We're hoping that the June presentation will provide us with that sort of solidified direction. But there is still opportunity for council to say, no, we're good. We don't want to pursue this, unfortunately. But that we're hoping that won't be the case. I think really what's gotten us this far is just the change in sort of that political will. I think there's a lot of councillors who see the benefit and the value, and even so much to say that some of the councillors that have been, are serving their second, third term, fourth, fifth, sixth term of council, who may not have been on board last time, we're starting to see a shift in that, and they're starting to turn around. So it's all been very positive so far, and we're hopeful that that we'll be able to get it approved this time around. Very
cool. So my last question.
Yeah, sorry. I was just going to jump in really quickly, Michael, just for your information. We've also seen some councillors who, as Carrie pointed out, and I can say specifics because I don't work for the city of Hamilton, but like Councillor Brad Clark was very opposed to the program in previous terms. Like we're talking many years ago, and he's coming around to how different programs the program could look. And then as well, Councillor John Paul Danko also pushed for a motion to speed up the timelines for implementation. As Carrie said, should council actually approve it? And so there's been a lot more, at least from our perspective as outside advocates, a lot more passionate interest in this. And I would say Councillor Danko has been really pushing it along, and some other councils have certainly taken more interest than they ever have before, to Carrie's point as well, in terms of our conversations we've had with them. Yeah, and I think if I could add, some of the incidents that have happened in Hamilton over the last few years are certainly on top of mind at council, and we've put in front of them over the last 2 years anyway, sort of a needs-based budget. And that's really outlining for them what our infrastructure deficits are. And, we saw it with the Burlington Street situation that happened back at the end of last year, where there's things going on out there that we don't even know is going on, and we're hoping that we're going to be able to find everything, but there's a lot of issues with our system that we need to address, and we can't do that without this source of funding that would come from a fee structure like the stormwater fee. So I think they're realizing that, and we have to pay for this stuff, and the burden shouldn't be on the taxpayer that doesn't have a lot of paved surface on their property. So I think that's sort of key right now in the political climate.
Right. So it sounds like you guys are kind of taking a page out of the KW book with the more you pave, the more you pay kind of mentality?
I think that's where they're heading. Yes. They're looking at various commercial institutions as well. And right now that burden is on the regular ratepayer. So for, the big box stores out there that have massive stores and massive paved surfaces, that's really being covered by the water in wastewater rate, right? So we have a portion of that is dedicated to stormwater, but it's just not enough at this point. So and the parking lots that are out there that don't have water fees because they don't have water connections, they're not
Right.
paying anything at all, right? So yeah, so there's a lot of variables to consider in this process.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Actually,
Yeah.
before we potentially wrap up, I have a question for Patrick, if that's okay. Very quickly, Patrick, in Kitchener, or was it Waterloo? I'm trying to recall. Mature trees count towards the rebate. I'm just wondering, what is the threshold? Is there sort of a minimum age that it has to be for that rebate? And if you know, why was that chosen?
Yes, it is in City Waterloo, and it basically is diameter of breast height, which the people who, I know there's a couple tree people in the room, they'll understand what that means. But I couldn't tell you exactly what DBH it is, but that was the real sort of crux. It has to meet a certain threshold of DBH. And the rationale behind that is once it reaches a certain size, then it's going to start providing those benefits by reducing runoff.
I had a
Thanks.
question too. That's okay. I could talk about this all night, but I won't. I'll try to make it succinct. So thank you, everyone. I definitely learned something from all of you, so I appreciate that very much. And I think when we first reached out to the City of Hamilton to put this webinar together, we were hoping to get a bit of an update on the stormwater credit fee in the consultant's approach and where they were at. And it's early days still, so nothing to report there, which was great. And that was where we were kind of directed in your direction, Carrie. So the Watershed Action Plan was something that I just learned about. And so we are, part of the Hamilton Harbor Remedial Action Plan. We're on that Bay Area implementation team. We're on the other acronym, which is the Watershed Nutrient Sediment Management Advisory Group, which I think is the Watershed Advisory Group that you're talking about. And way back when I think it was when Michael was a staff at Green Venture early days, we sat around, it was 2016, and worked on the urban runoff report with a task group there, and came up with some tools and suggestions. And now that we have also gone through a couple of demonstration, more than a couple, 15 or so depaves and several rain gardens and lots of community watershed stormwater garden type things, and working with GCC on the Living Cities framework. I'm wondering, how can we integrate all those things? Because now I'm sort of seeing those big boxes that you had listed as like watershed improvement placeholder. I'm like, okay, yes, what are they? What will they be? And we've for the last year and a half, we've had 2 years now of implementation of a local rain garden rebate program, which when we first launched, we thought, well, I don't know how this is going to go, but we'll see. And now, the community's there, like they're definitely interested, and for all kinds of reasons, definitely the same context that you've described around water quality issues, but also like ties in with climate change and pollinators and, you know, shade and all those benefits. So I guess my question is, if we're like on the front end of like leading some of these things and we haven't yet integrated well into that watershed action plan, how can we do that? And how can we help to bridge other community groups and other just general, you know, community members that might be interested in this thing, and really we'll need to win them over.
Yeah, absolutely. So you are on our list, and if Tim hasn't reached out to you yet, he will be shortly. He's working through a number of academic partners at the moment, and our Indigenous communities and non-government organizations such as yourself, Environment Hamilton, they're all on the list as well. So we'll get to you. It'll be within the next probably month or so that he'll give you either a call or he'll send a letter inviting you to participate in a workshop and essentially sit down and brainstorm. So yeah, it would be a great opportunity at that point to share whatever you have to help us through this, for sure.
Awesome. Thank you.
You're
Yeah.
welcome.
Thank you. Okay. Well, are there any other questions before we kind of wrap things up? Comments, concerns? We are just 15 minutes almost over time, so.
I do just want to mention just a bit of a plug. If folks are interested in providing delegation to General Issues Committee, that is the day. So far, it's tentative for June 28th. We're still trying to arrange, because it is a special General Issues Committee that they're putting in place just for this. And also, I'll be providing an update on the Watershed Action Plan. So yeah, if you want to go to council and have your say, that will be the day. And if that changes for any reason, which it could, I've been getting a little bit of whiplash on this one because they keep changing the date on me. But if it changes, I'll let you know.
And Carrie, will there be a report, a staff report in advance of that?
There will be, yeah, they're usually posted on our website about a week prior.
Okay.
And at that point as well, there is a process too that I should mention. You know, we wouldn't be a city if we weren't bureaucratic, but we do have a process online where you can basically register to delegate. So our clerks will need some information from you, but it is there for everyone's interest.
Yeah, well, we can share that information as well.
Great, thank you.
And I'll just quickly plug as well on May 10th at noon. It's no registration up, but maybe by the time this recording is up, we'll have registration up, and ACOM staff will be in attendance to answer some questions and answer some questions about the principles that were confirmed. So definitely stay tuned through Environment Hamilton for that, and it'll be at noon on May 10th. We know the time, we just haven't gotten the registration up yet.
Thanks, Ian. And thanks everyone again. I definitely also learned a lot, and I think this was really great. And if no one has any more questions, I will stop the recording now. Going once, going twice. Okay.